Carrie, thank you so much for joining me on the Salon Owners Collective podcast. Really pleased to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Well, before we dive in, why don't we start with, who are you, Carrie? Where do you live? What do you do? How did you get to be doing that?
Well, I'm Carrie, as I said, and as you can hear from my accent, I'm in the United States. I live in Florida, which is on the East Coast near Orlando, which is where Disney World is. So that's where I live in Central Florida, pretty close, about 30 miles from Disney. And I'm a fractional CMO and growth marketing consultant for professional service business owners. So what I do is I help them to grow and scale using sustainable marketing strategies. How I got there, that's a long story, but the short version is that I was a public school educator turned business owner and have loved working side by side with other female business owners, and started in 2017 as an integrator, moved into the marketing side and a couple of years later. So it's been a lot of fun and I really enjoy it. So I'm on year 6 now, I think, maybe 7, I'm not sure. It's been a while.
It all blurs in together.
Yeah. However old my youngest daughter is how old this business is. So she's 6.
There you go. Well, look, I'm really excited to chat with you because one of the things that we commonly, both of us, come across when working with, as you say, service providing businesses is this guilt around being a business owner and how we juggle our lives with, we need to be a mother, we need to be a wife or a husband, we need to run a business, we need to be there for our team, we need to be there for our customers. And somehow we get left with guilt. I remember what this feels like. I remember being that person, and I would be guilty at work that I wasn't with my children, and I'd be at home with my children. I'd be guilty that I wasn't looking after my team and leading my team and doing the thing. You also come across this. So tell me, what are your thoughts on this, and how do you observe it when you're working with business owners?
It happened to me first, so I can say firsthand, I was in that same boat. As I referenced earlier, I was a teacher first before I was a business owner, and I actually built my business while I was teaching for many years. So it is definitely, that came up a lot for me at the beginning, especially, and then I started to notice it in other women who were further along in it, because I've worked almost exclusively with women. It's not to say that I don't work with men. I have worked with some great guys, but it has come up more for women. I noticed a lot of the women I work with are also mothers, and they have pretty high-powered businesses of some type of service provision, and they are juggling and balancing a lot. And so this particular thing came up, and it really kind of, I think, stems back to a couple things. The first is it came up for me and these other women more when we weren't necessarily focusing on our own personal care and own mindset work. That was a big part of it that I noticed, is that there was a deficiency there. And when we would start to kind of put some time aside to do that personal work, whether it is through therapy, self-care, mindset work, that guilt would start to dissipate. And then the other thing I noticed that we weren't doing is we had a big boundaries issue. That was another one that kind of stemmed back to the guilt, is because we really just had no clear boundaries around anything. And when I started to put some really significant boundaries on myself in my own business, is when I started to notice the guilt dissipating. So both of those things, when I was doing them, helped me tremendously. And I don't feel nearly as much guilt today that I did 6 years ago when I started. And for the most of the women that I work with, when they have instituted a lot of that, and now it's unusual for me to encounter that with a client now, because they have done so much work. I will notice it more in someone when I can tell that they're not taking care of themselves in one of those two areas.
Yeah, and it's hard to transition, I think, first to be aware that you're walking around feeling guilty all the time, and to recognizing that you actually have the power to change it, and not just
Yeah.
this is what's happening to me, or this is where I find myself in life. I have to suck it up and live through, to have the things that I want in my life, or to even then feel trapped. I know a lot of business owners that I work with now feel trapped inside their business, or trapped with the weight of the burden, and then that's something else to feel guilty
Oh,
about.
for sure.
Um,
Especially when you grow it, right? When you get it to a
mm,
place where you're established and you're successful, whatever that means to you, that will come up a lot. You start to kind of feel trapped or sort of in this odd cycle where you keep kind of going in the same thing over and over again. And that can feel hard for someone who would consider themselves a visionary or maybe more of a creative minded person. That's not an easy place to be. And so that's where you feel bad because you built this thing and then it doesn't quite meet the maybe the expectations that you were kind of hoping for.
I remember when I had my previous business, my salon. My 2IC and I would say, "Oh my God, we've built a monster and now it needs to be fed." Like it really felt like now we have to feed the monster. The monster's not feeding us.
Yeah.
And that is the place that it starts to, there's more than guilt now. There's now stress and strain and the weight of a growing family, or being awake all night and then having to go and feed the
Yeah.
monster. So let's talk a little bit about how we can unpack, like, what in your experience, because I too have firsthand experience of this. What would be one step that someone can take if you can suddenly be aware, actually, I'm feeling that guilt constantly now at the moment too?
Yeah. I would say number one, just admitting out loud that it's okay to feel this way is really important. That there's a lot of, and again, this seems to be a female issue more than men. Like I don't see my guy clients really talking about this as much, but it comes up a lot in conversations with my female clients. And I think just being able to have a place where you can admit that out loud and it's safe is really important. So if you have someone on your team that's a leader that you trust, I would even encourage you to consider having a trusted advisor, whether that's a coach, a therapist, a friend, colleague, whatever, to be able to start those conversations, to have that you have a safe place. Like that's really, really, really important as a first step. That was what I did. And a lot of my other clients also have coaches or therapists or someone that they go to that isn't just focused on the strategy and helping them grow their business, but is helping support them personally and their personal growth, which is a really important need for all business owners to have. So you can decide what that looks like. It can be a therapist, but it could also be a life coach. It could be another type of coach, or it could be a friend that you boxer, doesn't matter. But you need that. That would be my number one recommendation, is if you don't have somebody, that would be the first step, is to find a support person. And then secondary from that would be to put time on your calendar for yourself. Start looking for like 30 minutes a week, if that's all you have, to just get outside. Like do something that's nothing to do with your business. That's just for you. Like it seems silly, but it really does have a compounding impact over time.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with both of those. And the stepping into, even if it's only 30 minutes, and then building up over time as you can eke the time out. I think part of that's tied into boundaries. I think that's like we could have a whole podcast conversation about boundaries.
I could,
Carrie.
and I have a lot to say about that topic too. Yes, 100%.
Just go back to the guilt, and I just want to add a third to your two super important steps, and that is, my mum taught me this actually as an adult, is to just give yourself some time. You don't have to solve this problem today, and I think that's just another thing to be guilty about. So, right, I'm aware of this, I want to change it, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'll be fixed by next week. I don't think we think literally I'm going to be fixed by next week, but we have this impatience that if we're not fixed in the next week or month, that we're a failure, the system doesn't work. Carrie told me to do half an hour every week, and I just can't, that system doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I think we don't give ourselves the time to let it seep in. Like if I think about some of the big mindset work that I've done over the years, sometimes they take years to really change a lifetime of habit and behavior and trusting yourself that, things can be different. And so my sort of third step is be patient. Rome isn't built in a day, and getting rid of guilt isn't going to happen overnight either. It's a couple of years work, really, probably. Not to say that you wouldn't be faster, but yeah, give yourself some space. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and it's also normal too. Like our brains are wired to resist change. It's just how they're wired. They're there to protect you and keep you safe. And so even the good changes, the good transitions you're attempting to make, your brain may naturally want to resist. So you may experience some sort of level of resistance, and that's extremely normal. And it's really just the physiological ways our brains are trying to keep us from danger. It's just a lot of the new things aren't really threats, but they perceived as threats from our brains. So that's just good old science, like trying to keep us safe. So just know that as you attempt to make some changes, whether it's seeking out support or putting time on your calendar or getting into therapy or counseling or coaching with a colleague, whatever it is, it's pretty normal to experience some resistance there. So don't beat yourself up and give yourself a lot of time. Like you said, that's so important.
Okay, let's switch it up a little bit. One of the things that you really focus on, Carrie, is marketing strategy and making sure there's a good strategy in place. And I want to talk a little bit about scale. I love this word scale, but I just want to sort of articulate my version of scale, because not everybody understands, well, what is scale? Is it something on a fish? Not really sure.
If it were that easy, that would be awesome.
Scale means growth with unequal amounts of input versus output. So if you want to put a small amount of input, you're going to get a larger amount of output. If you can get your business to a point where your personal input is less, but you still get exponential growth, to me, that's effort of scale, because what we don't want is more effort means more growth. So to get more growth just means doubling down on the effort, or doubling down on the hours, or doubling down on volume of activity. It's a bit like being on one of those bikes at the gym when that's not actually, the wheels aren't actually touching the ground and you're just cycling, but you're not really going anywhere.
Going in circles.
Yeah, and lots of energy is being used. So it's like going up a gear on a bike, since we're on the bike analogy, and you're pedaling slowly, but you're going a lot of distance. And to me, that's you need to get into that type of model to be able to grow beyond the hours that you can possibly work. Is that fair?
I would agree 100% with you. When you're moving from growth, where you are putting in, like when you're building it and you're growing it, which is a good amount of hours input, of course, to scaling, it's a shift in mindset and actual focus. So you actually are limiting your focus and limiting your direct involvement to allow the greater output to continue to move you up the ladder, whatever you want to call it, mountain, so to speak. So it doesn't really work effectively if you put too much in, because it may not be the effective strategy. So you can put 80 hours in and then it may not be as effective. So yeah, limiting your focus is really important.
Yeah, so there comes a stage and phase in your business when this becomes appropriate. You can't obviously do that right at the beginning. When you're sort of in the operator phase, or it's probably not quite ready in the management phase when you're starting to build your team. But then the next phase after that, we can really get into sort of exponential growth. So let's talk a little bit about marketing in that particular phase, because we were talking just before we pushed record about what got you here to the stage that you're ready to grow doesn't always get you there. And you see this happening a lot in the marketing space. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things that when you're building your business that's helpful to get you started or to help you build is utilizing what we call like I hate to call them cookie cutter strategies because it sounds really negative, but like that's the best like visualization I can see, which means like typically you might be in a coaching program or a mastermind, or you go to a conference or an event and you get to see a wonderful like framework that someone else has used for their business that you can take and apply to yours, which is really helpful when you are building. It's super duper helpful to get you started. It makes the process a little bit quicker and more efficient. However, when you are entering more of a scaling phase, so this is typically around like, someone's maybe 500,000 in revenue and they're maybe scaling from there. So that's typically when this starts to shift. In my experience, it's working with people, is those cookie cutter strategies to help you to scale aren't always as effective. And the reason why that typically is because it doesn't take into account your unique selling proposition, your specific client that you're servicing, what's special about you and how you service them, like their specific desires and pain points. Like we're not keeping all of these very unique to you and your business things in mind when we look at these cookie cutter frameworks. And we also have to really narrow the focus. So we're not looking at this thing that so-and-so said would work. We're actually looking at your business, your numbers, like your past things how they have performed. And we're looking at your things. And then we're going to take what you have done in your business and see how we can like deploy those things and make them more effective. So focus and fix versus just dumping a framework on you. Now, what I'm not saying is never ever use a framework again. I'm simply saying that you have to really focus on yourself and be specific to your business and what's working well and how we can lean into that. That's so important. And there's usually some opportunities along a customer journey, especially in service-based businesses, that you may just not even see that's an opportunity because you're right in the forest of your business and you might not be able to pull yourself out of it to see it as easily. And so there's usually something really small that you might not even think about that can have a huge impact on your revenue or your bottom line. And those are the types of things you would focus on if you were scaling that may not fit into a framework or a strategy. That's cookie cutter, for example.
Yeah, okay. I love that. Those standard operating type of marketing strategies are going to get you so far, but then you need to look internally and go, okay, what have we learned during that time? I would imagine that the focus then becomes on how well am I recording and reporting on what's actually working? Because if you don't have visibility over all of the things that you're trying, which is the 80-20 rule, right? What are the things that are actually working? What are the things that just kind of are mostly being ignored? So what reporting and being able to review what you've been doing becomes paramount, I would imagine.
Very, very important. Now, I'm not saying I haven't been in situations where I've come into something and it wasn't quite as easy to find the data as I would like. So there have been times where, don't shame yourself if you're listening to this going, I haven't been recording anything. Like I've been in situations where we've had to figure that out, and that's okay. Like if you can start tomorrow, it's not a big problem if you haven't been doing it. But it's really important to know, many people don't know how their offers are performing. They may not even know that they're not doing follow-up strategies. And for service businesses, like follow-ups is where the money is. So that's a huge opportunity that some people just don't even think about because they're too busy delivering and they're too busy like working and trying to help their customers and manage their team. And there's so many little things that you may not even realize that, oh my gosh, we could just do this like one thing or this over here, but it's because weren't even aware that was a possibility that could work well for you. You just weren't thinking about it because you're too busy doing your job, which is what they're doing. They have to provide that service.
That's right. And there comes probably about that turnover time, that kind of stage in business where actually as the business owner, you can no longer do all the roles. These roles start to become a part-time or a full-time job on their own. And I think as a business owner, sometimes we make the mistake at thinking because we've always done it that we need to continue to do it. Yeah. I've always done the social media and the marketing, so we've got to a certain busyness. We forget to think, oh, I need to replace myself. for that role, for
Right.
example, or outsource it, or employ somebody, or
Mhm.
find an expert to help me. What got me here is not going to get me to the next level. I think that happens about the 500K mark as well.
Yes.
Would you agree?
That's been mostly my experience. So when I work with people, I typically that will be one of the questions I ask, is because that's normal for that revenue level. Now it's not exact. It might be 480, it might be 600, but it's pretty close to midway to seven figures typically is a business is going to start experiencing that. It's just because when you scale, you're like building this next level of a plane while it's flying, but you can't possibly do that all by yourself. And so you're trying to kind of manage the plates on the air and the plane. It's a lot, and you start to feel very frazzled. And so that's when you can start to feel very, overwhelmed. And that's where like we talked about, the guilt will really ramp up if you're in that space a ton.
Yeah. And so maybe the solution is, rather than to feel guilty and keep trying to spin the plate, this is time to hire, recruit, and outsource, or get advice.
Yeah. And you have to plan that. This may feel a little scary to you because you're going to have to bring on the support at the entry point to the next phase, which can feel hard for your profit line or your revenue line. You might be used to having maybe a little bit of this level, and you have to bring it down just a smidge, but it pays off in the long run, because then your mental load diminishes significantly, and then you can drive the vision of the company, which is what, as the owner, you're really meant to be in that seat. Doesn't mean you don't have to stop providing services 100%. You can totally keep doing that if you want. I do still do that for my business, but it's so key to give that white space to yourself to have less mental load.
Yeah. Okay. And when you said support, we're talking about recruiting, or outsourcing, or
delegating, hiring.
Hiring essentially.
Bring on help.
Yeah, that's right. So it makes me think too, people often say, cash flow will stop you from growing. And if there's not the cash flow to recruit straight away, it stops us from recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, if we're smart, prior to that growth point, we'll just call it 500K at this point. Really, we want to be storing up a little bit of what otherwise would be profit, so we can actually pay for team members in advance to get us, kind of catapult us over that next loop. So then the pressure isn't out of cash flow, it's actually I've saved in advance for these team members, so I can grow to the next level. And you get the profit back once you reach the other side. 7K.
You do.
700K.
And you can do, also, I've had some clients in the past when they've hired roles, or even fractionally or as full-time employees, whichever, you can offer incentives, off results, which is a great way to, if your, revenue level is where you would love to hire them at this level, but your cash flow, you're just not quite there yet. You can offer some incentives and results-based items as well. It's a great way to, incentivize a team member who is helping you to grow your business anyway. So that's a great alternative. If you're wanting to give a promotion or give an increase in revenue at some point, it's a great way to kind of start that process.
Yeah. Carrie, what's an example of a business that you've worked with that has done this? What were some of the strategies that they used to do and now they chose to implement? What's a story you can share with us, just to kind of let that land in our minds?
For sure. I have a couple. I'm working with two different business owners right now that are good professional service examples. One is a professional consultant, and the other, she's like an integrative she's a specialist in hypnosis, which is really interesting, service to provide. And both of them have kind of one-to-one in-person services, but also have digital offers. The thing that's been interesting is beforehand, they were utilizing, when they came to me, they really didn't have any sort of clear-cut, focused, kind of strategy around how to grow. So they were still kind of reliant on one was particularly reliant on Facebook ads for her evergreen funnel, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but having all of your eggs in a marketing basket is very risky. Let's just put it that way. So, and then the other was very, very reliant on another one, which is relationship marketing only. So one of the things that we have done with both of them to help them is to help them see the opportunity to kind of expand their marketing reaches without trying to be everywhere all the time. So we look for like the best opportunities for them. And both of them had a really big opportunity in the long form content space. I'm sure you're familiar with like blogging and YouTube, but a lot of professional service clients can get people from like Google, like using keywords and SEO. Those are very powerful opportunities. And the other opportunity that both of them had was around follow-up. There wasn't a very clear follow-up strategy. So once we implemented and we took a look at their business to see those opportunities, we started to implement some strategies. Both of them had record months in January, and one of them actually sold out her coaching program that she does, because she also has a coaching program. And part of that was because we were paying attention to and following up with people and listening to what they were saying. So when you do that in a service space, even if it's a coaching program, even if you're doing a digital offer and not just the one-to-one services, it has a huge impact on your ability to make money, really. I think if we hadn't listened to those follow-ups and done those specific conversations with both of those businesses, I don't think that they would have been able to see the revenue that they brought in. And they did it without like feeling like their hair was on fire. It was very in flow. They had the support they needed. They were very good about their mindset around it. And they were open to making changes when we noticed things not going maybe the way they were hoping to go at the beginning. So we made some shifts and that really helped. So, and that is all from looking at a very unique to them business model, business plan. Like we were using some elements of some other strategies, but it was really about listening to their people and paying attention and then activating from there. So it was really cool to see, actually. It was really fun.
I love that. I wanted to sort of recap those key things. So the first thing is having all of your eggs, if you will, all of your marketing activity happening in one space and potentially getting super good at it, but actually leaves you vulnerable and there's an opportunity to do. Very great at it. You're kind of saying like, let's do two things. We don't need to do all the things because that becoms overwhelming and the message might be diluted. But if you're really good at one thing, and typically here in Beauty Salon Owners, we're really good at social. That's an easy one to get hold of. What's one other strategy that we can do to implement? So we've got a two-legged stool, not a single-legged stool.
Yeah, there's like 4 different little levers you can look at and like just start to explore some other options out there.
And then the second great message from that is when you're creating, we call them leads, but people that are making inquiries, clicking on things, replying to conversations, the magic is in the follow-up. And I think that's a really important message because we see all this activity and we go, oh, why is nobody booking? But actually we need to bridge the gap between what we're putting out there into the world and getting the booking. That's up to us to do the conversation, and especially in this day and age. There's an opportunity, like you say, in follow-up, whether that's following up a client that's left or a client that hasn't quite made it yet. We've got to be brave enough to engage in follow-up. So I love that. Super, super great. Now, Carrie, you are a business owner. What is a quote or a mantra or something that, business is tough sometimes. What is it that keeps you on the straight and narrow and sane?
This one I got back in my teaching days, and it's been my mantra. Well, I have 2, but this one in particular comes from a Disney movie called Meet the Robinsons. And it's an old Disney movie, but keep moving forward is my favorite mantra. I've been using it for quite a long time, and it's so easy. You go through seasons of business. You will continue to go through seasons of business that are not, one of my past coaches calls them like spring, winter, summer, fall. Sometimes you be in a winter season where it feels very hard very difficult. And so it's so easy sometimes to want to burn it all to the ground. But if you just got to keep moving forward, that's especially in the professional service space, that's really important. That's my favorite. And keep it's a Disney movie. Can you believe that? Came from a cartoon, but it stuck with me. So I was like, I'm gonna just adopt it. So I try to keep that in mind when I get into hard times or hard spots.
Yeah, I love that. All right, what is a book that you've read recently, or a podcast that you've listened to, or something that you think all salon owners should get their hands on?
So I have a couple different books that I really love, especially to tell people to read. Both of them are kind of mindset-y, but they're also really tactical as well. So the first is Playing Big by Tara Moore. I love it. It's an amazing book. And I'm an Audible person, meaning I do a lot of audiobooks now because I'm so busy. So if you're really busy, both of these books are read by the authors on Audible. So if you do like to do that, like if you're into podcasting. And then The Big Leap is my other one that I love by Gay Hendricks. It's a much more of a mindset one. So if you're in a scaling space or you're entering that space, both of these books are really great listens. And then a third one I love is The Psychology of Wealth. I just read that recently. It's excellent. So if money, mindset, and money in general is something that you're thinking about, it's a really great book. All three read by the author on Audible if you prefer to listen versus read.
Yeah, that is me for sure. That's how I managed to squeeze it in. I don't prioritize the time to sit down and read, but I can prioritize listening while I'm walking, doing the dishes,
Yes.
vacuuming, driving,
Same.
all of those things. So that's how it works.
Yes, or you can get them on Kindle or actually get the real book if you want.
Yeah. All right. It's been amazing chatting with you, Carrie. Where can we find you, stalk you, look you up? What's your dub in your socials?
So my website's great if you want to know more about my actual business details. It's virtualsimplicity.co. But I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram the most, I would say. LinkedIn is where I spend a lot of times in terms of marketing myself. So just look up my name, Carrie Flynn, and you'll find me there. And Instagram is Virtual Simplicity. You might see me talk a lot about exercising, various fun stuff on Instagram. I work out at Orange Theory a lot. So and I share more of my kids' stuff over there. So if you want more of the personal vibe too, in addition to business, Instagram's probably the place to go.
Love it. All right. Amazing. Appreciate the time that you've given us today.
Thank you so much. I had the best time talking to you. Thank you again.